So Jennifer Donlon Wyant is our speaker today. She comes from the city of Sacramento, where she is the transportation planning manager, previously in charge of lots of bike head things, and is moving up in the world towards world, if not city, or city, if not world domination. She manages a team of transportation planners whose work includes long-range planning for mobility in the city through policies, programs, and projects. We heard a little bit about her at lunch, that she did a graduate degree a little bit later in life, and did so at San Jose State, and then went on to work at Alta and a few other things, and then eventually for the city. And I think today we're going to hear lots about some of the city initiatives, and maybe through that be able to think a little bit about how research might be able to support some of those things. So I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer.
Thank you. So hey everybody, Jennifer Donlon Wyant, my pronouns are she and her, and I am the transportation planning manager for the city of Sacramento. I'm also an avid person who loves walking, biking, and transit. I do drive. I own a car. My wife and I have one car in our household. Sometimes it's hard. Like when I forget I have a night meeting and it's far away and I'm like, oh, I need the car, but we make it work, and we made it work as a single car household for the last 5 years. And I love mobility. And so mobility I see as an opportunity for equity, for growth, for personal development, for getting to do fun things. Like I'm gonna go on a bike ride to a picnic this weekend. Also, it's foundational to the work we do because we all travel. It's in a way like a utility. However, I think it's more fun than utilities like sewer systems or water systems. No knock to the water and sewer people in the room, anybody's here, but mobility is definitely my thing. So thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. So as Carrie mentioned, I have taken an unusual path in my life of getting to where I am today. My undergrad is in sociology with a minor in urban studies and women's studies. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was 18, went to undergrad, and I went to a place called SUNY Geneseo, which is upstate New York between Rochester and Buffalo. I'm from New York City. It was a big culture shift for me to go upstate New York. They have different accents. They do things differently up there. And it was interesting. But I did my 4 years, and when I got out, I went back to New York City and lived there for a while. And after undergrad, I actually spent a lot of time working in coffee shops, going to a lot of punk rock shows, and traveling across the US. And then I got into planning, but I was doing land use and housing planning and working in an architecture firm, and it was okay. Until I met a guy who worked for San Francisco, and by this point I'm living in San Francisco, and he's working for SFMTA, and he's a transportation planner. I was like, oh, I can do that. So I decided to go to grad school and do transportation planning. I applied to a lot of schools, wound up going to San Jose State, and I thought that was probably one of the best things that I did. It's maybe not the most competitive school, and maybe it is not the most academic school, but it is very pragmatic. And it's a great way to meet people and to make connections and learn real life things about implementation, which is what I'm very much interested in. And so since that, I was 34 when I went to grad school, and worked at the city of Oakland in their Department of Transport. They were public works back then, they were transportation folks. And since then, Oakland, I worked at Alta Planning and Design, worked my way up to becoming a principal at the firm. And then the city of Sacramento recruited me. And I said, no, thank you, I don't want to do public sector, I love consulting. And they did a round of recruitment, and they didn't fill a position. They came back and said, please apply. And so I did. I figured I'll do it for a year or two, see how it is. And I'm actually in year 7 now. My May 16th will be my 7-year anniversary at the city of Sacramento. I'm very excited because we've done some good things. I'm part of a culture change at the city to rethink what mobility is. And it's not just single occupancy vehicle, but it's really thinking about other things. So I built a whole team. There was no transportation planning. Built a whole team around transportation planning, thinking about what our future should be, what we want it to be, and including more voices at the table. It used to be that it was just the loudest voices in the city, which tend to be the white affluent communities of the city. And instead, we've been spending the last 7 years building relationships with our under-resourced communities of color in North Sacramento and South Sacramento to make sure they have a voice and a seat at the table. So that's a little bit about me and my team and the work that we do. We're small, we're mighty, and we're really passionate, and we're perpetually caffeinated. And we are the largest group, loudest group on the 2nd floor at City Hall. And here is outside. So today I'm going to talk about transportation idea to implementation. Definitely though, I'm looking forward to more of me talking at you, to the Q&A session afterwards. I think that's probably the most exciting thing. And also, I'm not sure what you're interested in. So am I blocking the screen? Have it okay. To the side. Let me if I turn it on. There we go. So the city of Sacramento is big. We have 1,800 miles of streets, which that's just linear streets. You don't have the lane miles, which our engineers like to do, because the lane miles is more, they like to be impressive, but 1,800 miles. We have over 800 traffic signals, and some of them are older than me. And so that's problematic for the things that we want to do for safety. We have 250 miles of on-street bikeways and 40,000 streetlights, those pedestrian scale streetlights. A lot of infrastructure to manage. It was all built over different times. Some of it even wasn't the city of Sacramento. It used to be the city of North Sacramento that was annexed in the 1960s. And how do we pay for transportation improvements is a really, really, really big thing. Who thinks that it comes out of the city's bank accounts? Does anybody think? You all know it doesn't, right? Everything that we do is a little bit of Hunger Games, and it is mostly through grants. 43% of our money comes from grants, and we use most of our other money on match. So most grant programs say, we'll give you money, but you have to contribute a little bit to it. And when they say a little bit, they say a little bit with a wink. They're gonna say it's 11.4% of the total project cost, and tell you that is absolutely not true. Because they won't pay for my overhead, for my time, for my benefits. They will not pay for if it's a bikeway project. They will not pay to improve the pavement. If anybody bikes, you know that improved pavement is much nicer to bike on. Or if it's a safety project through safety funds, they won't pay to improve a curb ramp so that it's more accessible, but the curb ramp is required. So generally, we have to have local dollars anywhere between 20 and 50% of the total project costs. And so that's where we use mostly our sales tax measure. In Sacramento County, we have Measure A, which is the sales tax measure, half-cent sales tax that comes into transportation. Is divvied up between our bus system, regional transit, and then to the different cities and jurisdictions. We also have gas tax. Gas tax is about 28%. Everyone says, I pay my taxes. Shouldn't you be able to do what we need to do? Your gas taxes are not covering transportation needs, not even maintenance needs or improvement needs. Although at the city of Sacramento, what we do with our gas taxes, we don't just repave the street. We repave the street and put it back there. We change it. We make it safer, we do more multimodal, and find better ways to do things. So this is where the monies come from. We have over 700 planned projects in the city of Sacramento that cost about $5 billion. And every complete street project, so you see where to make it better for walking or biking or improving safety, is anywhere between $20 and $70 million. So that's why we have a $5 billion backlog of planned stuff. And our infrastructure is old. As I mentioned, the city of Sacramento is actually the oldest city in California. We applied for a chartership in 1849. We received it in 1850. We can argue with historians. We say 49, they say we're 50, but either way, we're good, right? We're old. And our infrastructure is very, very old. And we haven't prioritized maintenance. So we've got a $1.4 billion backlog. And so together, that's like $6.5 billion in like needs. And I don't have $6.4 billion. You don't. California doesn't, maybe the feds do, but at everybody's level of this need, because it's not unique to Sacramento, it's an impossible situation to fix. We get about $42 million a year, and I don't say we get Hunger Games. It's mostly competitive. Most of the money we get is through grants, a little bit of gas tax, anywhere between $10 and $12 million a year in gas tax. And then Measure A fluctuates depending on what people are buying. Are they buying a lot? During the pandemic, actually, we saw more sales tax revenue because people were at home and they were maybe buying more things. We're seeing a drop in revenue now around the sales tax. It's about $42 million a year. So if you think about that, with our $6.5 billion backlog or our $5 billion backlog of plan improvements, it's going to take hundreds of years to address our needs. I'm not here to scare you. I just want to set the reality of like we have a big problem and no easy solution. And this is the map of the city of Sacramento and all of our planned projects. It's a lot. Our city is a weird shape. It has to do with politics, just how it is. And so these are only our plans things, not even the things that we haven't thought about yet. I mean, like I have plenty of ideas of things that we could do, and they're not on the map. These are the things that are approved by city council just in the last 20 years, just 20 years. But we haven't a way to move forward with them. So the beginning, what I want to talk a little bit about today is idea to implementation. So I've got this crazy idea that I want to do whatever it might be. Well, how do we decide what is that process? How does it work in government? This is specific to the city of Sacramento. Every city will be a little bit different, but generally the processes are pretty similar. So you have an idea, it's smaller, but you probably can't see it this far away. It says stop signs, crosswalks, sign or striping improvements, traffic signal issues, or spot improvements like pothole repair. We have 311 in the city of Sacramento. You can report it to 311, and we have a group called the Traffic Investigators, affectionately known as the Gators. And their mascot is an alligator. And they will work with you as the customer to identify what that issue is and whether or not we have the resources, how can we fix it. That's smaller stuff, and generally we can make that happen. I'd like to say within a month or two, depending on the issue, but we can move pretty quickly on those smaller things. And there are some of the things called it depends, and that's up here kind of fluid. Maybe a bikeway, maybe a short-term bike lane, maybe it's something a block or two stretch that our crews can do and it's not going to cost us significant dollars. We have money in the bank, we can do it. Maybe it's a small gap in the sidewalk network. We were talking earlier about lunch about sidewalks. Sidewalks in California are weird. They are in the public right of way, meaning that the city has jurisdiction over controlling what happens in it, but the responsibility for maintenance and repair is the adjacent property owner. And so the way that it works generally with new sidewalks is when a developer comes in and they build it. There isn't just money for sidewalks anywhere. And so we have small pots of money. What we try to do is focus the dollars where they're needed most. And if there's a great need, we're working on one in South Sacramento right now where there's sidewalk in one area, no sidewalk in this area here in a school, in an under-resourced community where a lot of folks walk to school. And so we're gathering our monies, looking in the couch cushions that put in that sidewalk. So the kids can walk to school because it's a busy street. It's not a street appropriate for 8-year-olds to be walking on the shoulder. So we're working on that. But it depends because it can only be small things like that. Bigger sidewalk needs need bigger dollars, and that means we have to apply for grants. Curb ramps. Curb ramps are another thing that it depends. Curb ramps are incredibly important for accessibility and making sure that we're providing options or ability for people with disabilities to move around our city. Also for parents with strollers or maybe your bike trailer through. So they're really, really important. And sometimes we can just make it happen with a small part of money that we have locally, but if it's a whole corridor that needs curb ramps, again, that's probably going to be a grant. And so these are the bigger things. New traffic signals. New traffic signals cost over $1 million each. A lot of money. And now with the backlog of getting infrastructure, it could take up to a year when we order it until we get it. No, notice, the closed captioning is on, so I'll speak more clearly so they can understand. Crosswalks that require traffic signals. Crosswalks, marked crosswalks. Nearly every intersection is a legal crossing unless prohibited. But a marked crosswalk are the stripes that you see on the street, whether they're transverse to this way, or they're a ladder, or in Sacramento, we have a 444, which is a fancy crosswalk. They, depending on the number of travel lanes, the posted speed limit, and the vehicle volume, the type of treatment of that crosswalk will vary. It could be just paint because it's a low volume, low speed street. It could have what we call rapid rectangular flashing beacons, which you push a button and the little lights flash on the side. That's about $40,000-ish. It could be a pedestrian hybrid beacon, which is the big mast arm that goes over. It does flashing red lights, solid lights. Nobody knows what it means, but they're approved by the federal government. Research, right? This is where research comes in for you. We're allowed to use it, but do drivers really know what it means? I don't think so, but that's another type of treatment. And so what type of treatment do we have for every crosswalk and in different monies? But they're going to be expensive. Traffic calming. We know in the city of Sacramento that we are one of the worst cities in California for traffic fatalities and serious injuries per population. There are two big reasons why we're that way. Impaired driving. So please don't drink and drive or high and drive, get an Uber. But I also can't do anything about that. This is designing my infrastructure. That's going to be a land use thing, right? Getting people closer to where they want to have fun so that they can walk, bike, or take transit. And so that's a housing and land use thing. But the other one is speed. Driving at unsafe speeds. Slow the heck down, people. We'll all get there. It might be a couple of minutes later than if you've been going 40 or 30 miles per hour. But we want folks to slow down because that's one of the most significant reasons that we see so many fatalities. And we know that if we slow people, we know people are going to make mistakes. We're going to have crashes no matter what. But if we slow you down so that the crash is survivable, so that we don't have serious injuries. That's a win for everybody. So we really want you to slow down some traffic calming. Traffic calming can come in a variety of ways. I like the road diet, taking down the street from 5 lanes to 3 lanes or 6 lanes to three lanes, create that friction. But there could be speed bumps, chicanes, all those good sort of things are traffic calming. And new sidewalks, these are big things. They require a planning effort. And that's where my team comes in. They say, hey, community, what would you like to see? What are the issues? Do you have concerns? What is the data set? Let's work together on a cohesive vision for what you'd like this street to be, or this area to be. Back in my consulting days, I did that for 5th Street, which I think might be this way. I'm not sure which way 5th Street is. Here, that way, great. So I was many years younger, and 5th Street used to be a 4-lane roadway, 2 lanes in either direction. And the city wanted to investigate bringing it down to 1 lane in either direction and getting bike lanes on there. And there are multiple benefits for that. But that's what a planning study does. We look at the data, we work with our communities, we work internally to reach consensus on what those outcomes would be. And then we have a plan. That's what my team specializes in. But you develop that plan and then design, environmental clearance, that all requires a lot of money. So here's the path to implementation. You probably can't see it because everyone's in the back, so I'm going to walk you through this. So this is a roadway exemplary, like showing a path of how things move through. We have our vehicles. Our vehicles are shoes, bicycles, wheelchair, bus, car. These are the vehicles that get us around. And we're going to start off with our ideas. There's a whole bunch of ideas. I have ideas. You probably have ideas to improve our transportation network. And I'll say 90 to 95% of them are fantastic, absolutely fantastic. I love it. But again, limited resources. So the next step would be seek a grant to develop a plan. This is most government because we don't fund things internally. Very few cities use their general fund dollars for transportation. So you have to seek a grant. So we can't find a grant for all of those. So then you see fewer vehicles. Seeking a grant, generally transportation planning grants come from one source in California. That's the Caltrans Sustainable Transportation Planning Grant Program. And that is competitive, limited in its funding. The city of Sacramento applies every time and we generally get 1. We're lucky if we get 2, but there have also been years where we didn't get any. So we get the planning grants. Then it takes 2 years. Caltrans, so we get the money from, says you only have 2 years. So get it done in 2 years, which sometimes can be a little stressful because what if you don't reach consensus? What if there is a problem and COVID happens? How are you going to do community engagement, reach consensus? Or most recently, we had a project where reaching consensus with our communities and very varying opinions on how the corridor should be and who was it serving, because it was serving people going through, as well as serving the neighborhoods. And how do you find that balance? But generally, it's about 2 years to get that done. So we spend about 2 years looking for money. We spend about 2 years working on the vision. So we get 4 years in, right? And probably about at least $500,000 worth of work. So then we're finished with the plan. And we have to wait again for another funding opportunity. Generally, it's probably going to be another 2 years. So the next phase is called preliminary design and environmental clearance. It's engineering, preliminary engineering, and then getting your California Environmental Quality Act clearance, or if it's going to be federally funded, which are usually the bigger ones, your NEPA clearance. So we look for funding for that. Again, we have to wait 1 to 2 years because typically that's through SACOG. SACOG is the Sacramento Area Council of Governments. It is our MPO, which is our Metropolitan Planning Organization. They take in all the federal dollars and they distribute it locally, and it's competitive. So we apply, we hope we get it. The preliminary design environmental clearance costs anywhere between $1 and $3 million, depending on the project and the complexity. And that takes 2 to 7 years. So again, we had our 4 years, then we had another 2 for rating it, then the work takes 2 to 7. So we're adding up, and I'm not really good at the math, so if somebody tells me we're at least like 12 years in, right, through that work. So we do the preliminary design, and that's when you get into the detail. Like my team says, we want a separated bike lane, 2 travel lanes, and crosswalks here, and traffic signals here, and maybe a roundabout here. And we have that planned, but we don't know how wide are the travel lanes, what types of crosswalks we're gonna have, and that's when the engineers come in and they do all that work. Then we finish that, we have to wait for another round of grants. And you see there are fewer and fewer vehicles because again, not everything can move forward. So we had lots of ideas, Only some of them are moving forward, even fewer are moving forward now. And then we go into final design and construction. And that could be funded together or it could be funded separately. Again, it's competitive, it is very Hunger Games. And it's like West Sacramento, we compete against them all the time. I want them to succeed. But I also really want that money because I want to do whatever project we want to go after. We just recently applied to SACOG for 9 projects. We got 4 or 5 funded. And so it's hard. It's hard to move these things through. And sometimes you don't even get it funded all the first time. I don't know if you know Broadway in Sacramento, just south of downtown, currently a 4-lane roadway, needs a lot of help. We've been working on it since 2012. We're going to do a road diet, improve pedestrian crossings. This was born out of the business community, something they asked us to do. Buffer bike lanes, and we applied for funding and we got a third of it funded. We waited 2 more years and we got another third funded. And now we just applied and we got the last third funded. But this is why it takes so long. And the problem with it taking so long is like, if you cared about it in 2012, you might have left, you might have lost interest, you might not have been here in 2012. And now you're like thinking like, why is the city doing this? Is this really our need? Have our systems changed? Is a buffer bike lane the appropriate treatment on a street like that? I wouldn't do a buffer bike lane, but that's what's already been done and approved. So it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of money. I would say that we didn't set up the system, but it's the system in which we work. And it can be a little frustrating for staff. And I'm sure it's frustrating for our communities. The challenge is that there's great need, but just not enough money. So we have to, yeah.
I just had a quick question. So before you had a map, like on the second page of the map showing all, oh, there you are.
Yeah.
All the planned projects that are like in line to receive funding from the past 20 years. You just gave an example right there of something that was designed 11 years ago,
yeah,
but then finally just received funding and is now being implemented. To what extent is there a review process of these projects that were designed 2 decades ago and are just now receiving funding? Because as we all know, during lunch, we discussed this, technology, transportation have changed significantly every 5 years.
Yeah.
There's different cycles.
Yeah. So they're not really reviewed. And that's part of the challenge because, for example, the street that I just described that had 3 phases to get its construction funding, we had to have the plans finalized by the first application. And so that first application was 5 or 6 years ago. And so for changing it now, we'd have to start all over again with the redesign and we don't have money for redesign. So that is a significant issue because technology changes, our designs change. Whereas 10 years ago, a buffer bike lane was a cool thing. Maybe it isn't such a cool thing anymore. It's a great double parking lane, not so much great for biking. And so it is a challenge that we face. Another challenge that we face is like in cities where there are undeveloped areas in the city of Sacramento, North Sacramento, north of Thomas, still a developing part of the city. And there are development agreements that were instituted decades ago of what that street network would look like. And we are obligated, legally obligated to use those street designs. That's something that we would not do now and probably should be changed, but we don't have any recourse to actually change that. A lot of challenges. We're actually going to be looking into something like at least inventorying what they are to see if we have room for improvement moving forward in the next year. So that we $5 billion in planned projects takes a really long time. And so how do you prioritize that? And so that's a big thing that my staff did over the last 2 to 3 years is working on what we call the Transportation Priorities Plan. How are we going to prioritize this great need? So we worked with our communities over the last 2+ years, specifically focusing our touches with our communities that are under-resourced, the folks who don't trust government, that maybe haven't participated in the process, because we fully expected, and it worked out this way, that we knew we would hear from more affluent communities. They just came to us. They told us what they wanted, and that was great. We wanted to make sure that we engaged our under-resourced communities. We did a lot of things. We did virtual gatherings because it was COVID, online survey. We did paper surveys. The libraries were open in the city of Sacramento, and they were being well used during COVID. So we had paper surveys and staff in the libraries, and then we attended existing meetings, neighborhood associations, and sometimes Towards the end, there were a lot more in-person meetings, trades day, getting people for jobs. There was a fashion show we went to that was super fun. The Banana Festival that I still don't know what it is, but we were there and it was very popular. And so we just went to where the baseball games, where the people are to get their input. And the outcome was that we're asking them, what are your values for investing in transportation? I didn't want to get into like, is this the popular project? Is this the popular policy, right? Start with the policy. What is the types of things, what are the types of things we want to invest in? And so of those conversations, this is what we came with. Improve air quality, climate, and health, because we will encourage walking, biking, transit supportive, because we don't run transit, and electric vehicles. Improve equitable investment, and this is a big one. City of Sacramento had never used equity as a metric for investing dollars. And it took a lot of difficult conversations. We first wanted to do, we were able to do, investing in our neighborhoods that lack basic transportation infrastructure. Big parts of the city don't have sidewalks, curb gutter, they don't have streetlights. We mapped all that, so we knew where those were. The next thing I wanted to do, well, my communities asked, well, my job is to facilitate community vision, was to invest in communities that are recipients of racism and bias, specifically invest in our communities of color. They're majority Black, Latino, Asian, Pacific Islander, and Indigenous. So I took that to the city attorney's office and they said, go take a hike, you can't do that. And I said, well, and I brought it back to my team, and my team includes, we had an equity roundtable who were advising us throughout the process, and they were disappointed, and I was disappointed. And I say, JDW, can you go back, ask again? And I respect my equity roundtable, the people that are there. I said, okay, I'm gonna go ask again. And I did, and I got a different answer. And the answer was, okay, let's try, let's see what happens. And so we did. And I'm incredibly proud of the City of Sacramento for using race as a metric for investing. It's approved by council in November, and I'm so very excited for that. And it's gonna be our guiding document now for where we make our financial investments. So that was the equitable process. Access to destinations, parks, schools, and jobs. See, it's pretty obvious, we wanted to confirm, because maybe they wanted to connect to community centers. But no, this is where our communities wanted to go. Improve safety. I think I already mentioned that we're one of the worst cities for traffic safety in California. We've identified our high injury network, 225 miles of our 1,800 miles of streets where we see serious injuries and fatalities. So investing in those. And then fixing and maintaining the system. Our streets are bumpy, they're old, they're full of potholes, traffic signals older than me. So fixing and maintaining the system. So these are the metrics that we got approved by council in March of 2022. And then our job was to apply it to projects. We had the metrics. So we gave points to everything that was also approved by council. So everybody got 12 points. We thought about increasing equity. Council wasn't cool with that. They just wanted to keep it all the same. So 3 points for improving biking, 6 points for improving walking, and 3 points for transit and electric vehicles. You might say, why walking? 6 points more than everybody else. We know that 50% of our severe and fatal crashes involve somebody who is walking. We know that walking is the most equitable form of transportation because you don't need anything other than you to make happen. And that's what our communities told us. And my job is to facilitate community vision. So that's how we came up with that score. For equitable investment, 6 points if it's in an area that lacks basic infrastructure, 6 points if it's in a community that's been a recipient of racism and bias. Then we did 4 points if it's near employment density, 4 points if it's near a park, or 4 points if it's near a school. Transportation safety, 12 points are the full available points if it's one of our 10 worst corridors in the city for transportation safety. They all but one are in our most under-resourced communities. Full 12 points for that. If it's on that high injury network, that 225 miles of streets, but not one of the top 10, it gets 6 points. So we did that one. And then fix and maintain the system. We did a ratio of traffic volume to PCI, which is pavement condition index. Everybody, it's a complex thing. Basically, it's like how crappy is your street? It's a scale. And we did a volume to quality ratio. And then if a project improves a traffic signal, it gets 4 points. Because our traffic signals are old, they really need help. So that was the metric system that we used. And then we applied it to all 700 planned projects. Awesome thing, 70% of the high priority projects are on streets with the highest numbers of injuries and fatalities. 80% of the high priority projects support biking, 100% support walking, making improvements to those modes. 90% will improve pavement quality on streets that serve a lot of people. And then 95% communities that lack basic transportation infrastructure. infrastructure. So for those of you that can see the map, the purple is high priority. That's about $1.3 billion worth of work, but high priority. Yellow or golden is medium priority, and then green is lower priority. The black lines that you see here are projects that are funded or mostly funded and are already in the works, such as the Del Rio Trail, Franklin Boulevard, Complete Streets, 34th Street Bike Lane, Vision Zero here, a bunch of cycle tracks or separated bikeways on the grid, that a road diet up north. So those are all funded and those are in the works. But we know that this is about $5 billion worth of work total. And of the purple lines, it's about $1.3 billion. We don't have 1.3, but at least now we have a process to identify when we're going after grant funding, which grants we should be going after for which projects, instead of the people who have connections to City Hall calling and saying, I want this project to move forward. First time we've ever done this at the city. I'm really excited for this. We went through 2 grant cycles for different grants using this process. Like I said, we did pretty good. Council is sticking to it so far. You never know, but they are. And it's helped us have conversations with our community members about where our priorities are. And you say your idea is fantastic, but we've got $1.3 billion ahead of it. So now I'm going to do a little pivot and talk about, well, we've got the projects, but what about the design of the projects? And I think as folks in the academic world, you're working to seeing outcomes, like you want to maybe work on improving air quality, addressing climate change, addressing VMT or GHG. I'm going to briefly talk about how our design affects the outcomes that we want to see. Who here knows what a MUTCD is? Handful, all right. In California, we have the CAMUTCD. It's the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices. It is the traffic engineer's Bible. If it's not in there exactly as we're designing it, it's not happening. The reason why is that cities incur liability by designing our streets, by having our streets however they're organized. And they want to make sure there's a lot of thought and process that goes into those designs. The thought and process with you all, when you're doing your research. Think about what the outcomes are and the things that you're looking at. So this is the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices is one important design document for how we design our streets. Another one is the Highway Design Manual, as it's not just for highways. Even though Caltrans, which is our state DOT, might say, well, it doesn't really necessarily have to be for highways. Every city says, well, it is, because of liability purposes and concerns. If we do something different and we get sued, what was the reason and the justification for it? And a lot of thought went into this. Maybe not as multimodal and as focused on slowing drivers down as I would like, but I can say that they do put a lot of thought into how they work on that. And then they amend it every once in a while. It's called a DIB, or a Design Information Bulletin. For example, separated bikeways or cycle tracks. They weren't around, and they update the major documents like every 6 to 10 years. And so in order to incorporate separated bikeways or protected bike lanes, as some people call them, there's drama behind the name, we can go into another time. They had to do a design information bulletin to make them happen. And then those are the state documents. And then in the city of Sacramento, we have our Section 15 street design standards that are more specific to the city. And they have not been updated since 2009. They're getting updated. And this is an example of the street design standards for the city of Sacramento, thinking about our outcomes. It's a 6-lane arterial designed to handle anywhere between 27,000 and 54,000 vehicles per day. That is a lot of car traffic. That means it's high volume, high speed, a lot. You know what you get if you're biking? A 6-foot bike lane right next to it. That is our standard in the city of Sacramento. That's not a very comfortable place to bike. I wouldn't bike there. And in fact, I would tell the engineer, don't bother putting bike lane in there because it's rarely going to get used. But that is our standard, and we're obligated to follow that. In fact, the city of Sacramento has no standard buffer bike lanes, separated bikeways. And those who have been at the city longer than me tell me when they developed this in 2009, the fact that they had a 7 to 10 foot planter strip was a big deal. And it was a big deal because the developers who own the parcels behind the sidewalk. So while you're taking that real estate out of something that I would have developed, I would have had more housing, more parking, more commercial real estate. The more that you take out of that, the more problematic it is for us. The urban forestry folks are saying, in order to have a healthy tree, we need at least 8 feet of landscaping so the root system can do whatever root systems for trees do. But that was a really big deal. And our standard sidewalk width is only 6 feet. I don't know about you, but I like to walk with people. And then when I passed by other people walking, I don't want to have to go single file. 6 feet is not a way to accommodate that, but these are the standards. So if we implement these standards, the outcomes are going to be only the most fearless people are going to be biking. People are only going to be walking if they have to walk. And we're encouraging driving by providing 6 lanes, because you know 3 on one side, 3 on the other, of being able to easily drive where you want to go to. So those are the outcomes that we receive when we build new streets like this. And then this is part of the MUTCD, or the Manual and Uniform Traffic Control Devices. They provide design guidance, and they will not be a test on what this means afterwards. But this is a standard bike lane striping section. And so in California, the rule is that you do a skip stripe on a bike lane as you approach an intersection. Drivers are supposed to merge into the bike lane to make a right turn and then make that turn. You have people biking next to moving vehicles who then coming into your bikeway, hopefully they see you, or hopefully you see them, and then you're sharing space as you go through. Outcome will be is that again, would you let an 8-year-old bike in an environment like this? I wouldn't. And so the outcome is that again, you're only going to get the most fearless people biking. And to be frank, most drivers don't understand the rules around merging into the bike lane, so it's inconsistent. So when I approach an intersection when I'm biking and I know a car is coming up, I'm going to position myself so I'm nowhere near them when they're coming up to the intersection, because I don't know what they're going to do. Are they going to merge into the bike lane like they're supposed to, or are they not? You never know. And so again, the design is getting the outcomes of not a lot of folks biking. Freeway ramps. This is your standard 5-foot bike lane going through cars coming off the freeway at 60 miles per hour, and you get some painted space. Again, outcome is that you're only going to get the most fearless people, or folks that have to do it because they don't have another choice. The bicycle is their main form of transportation. It could be because they can't afford anything else. Maybe they made a mistake and they got a DUI and they can't drive. Now they have to do this. And it's uncomfortable at best. It's risky at worst. And so, but these are our standards, and we have standards like this. We're never going to achieve our goals for a more climate friendly and a more equitable transportation system. I do work in government. I know I'm like raging against the system, but when we have set up a system that doesn't meet our goals, there's a disconnect. So when we design outcomes for bicycling as sport, and I just had a lovely discussion with my colleagues at the city of Sacramento yesterday, who were like, well, bicyclists are going too fast, or really there are a few people and it's a sport, or that walking is recreational, or transit only serves a few folks. Those are the outcomes that we are going to get. We want to design for what we want to see. What are our outcomes that we're trying to reach towards? So since 2018, we've been implementing some more fun things in the city of Sacramento, and it's been an adventure moving those through. These are my colleagues. We did a photo shoot. This is totally staged, but these are people who started scooting and biking since we put in our separated bikeways, right? Never, ever. Aubrey and Allison, they would never have done it before we started building this infrastructure. And now this is mode shift. They might not do every trip by walking or biking, but with 57% of our greenhouse gas emissions coming from transportation, every time they take a scooter to dinner or to the movie instead of driving, that's a win for us, right? And it gives them exposure, they try something new. And our bike share program, this was Jump at the time, Jump's not, but you know, other things are coming. And so we are opening up folks to new things, and even bike share unto itself. So I've been a bicyclist my whole life. I grew up really poor, and we had one car and 5 of us. And like when the car had to go into the shop, we brought our bikes so we could bike back from the mechanic. But when they were coming in, I was like, electric bikes. Why do we get electric bikes? This is 2017. And then Jump came with their electric bikes, and I'm like, oh, this is nice. I went out and I bought my own electric bike in 2019, right? So it's like a gateway drug. And so these are great tools. People with disabilities. This is a young woman who lives in Midtown Sacramento. She is not able to use a standard 2-wheel bicycle. Also not comfortable biking next to moving vehicles. When we built the separated bikeway, we went right past her house in Midtown. She came out with her dad in her wheelchair, so excited. And so then we did a ride, and she joined us on a ride with her adult tricycle, because now she feels comfortable bicycling in Midtown because it's an environment that meets her needs. And we should be building our infrastructure to meet the needs of our diverse communities. She makes me very happy. Or kids. So think policy. So kids walking to school is a good thing. Kids used to walk to school a heck of a lot more than they do now, because we built our environment to not be friendly for kids to walk to school, because we made our environment for adults who make critical decisions, not for kids who maybe don't always make the best decisions. And I think that we have to recognize that not all of our users of our system will make the best decisions. It's just reality. We're human, whether we're, you know, in our 20s, 30s, or 40s, or you're 8, or you're 12, or you're 88, and maybe, I don't know, when you stop making good decisions when you get older, let's say 90, I don't know what it is. And so what we did in the city of Sacramento is a state law that allowed us to lower speed limits in school areas to 15 miles per hour under certain circumstances. It has to be a 2-lane roadway, it can't be a big commercial. And so we did it, 225 schools in the, 225 streets in the city of Sacramento had their speed limits lowered to 15 miles per hour in 2018-19. In recognition that there was a policy that we can do, let's implement it, and let's see if we can make our streets safer for our kids to walk to school. Pretty exciting stuff. And then again, designing for our outcomes. This is a trail system up in North Sacramento, and it was built by developers. So the southern developer had to build their trail system, the northern developer had to build theirs, but nobody was responsible for the connection in between. So what we had was a bunch of folks jumping across the median on a 6-lane, maybe 4-lane roadway, I can't remember how wide it is. And so the outcomes was, oh, bad behavior. We set up for bad behavior by not providing a crossing. And so we got a small pot of money one time, and there's a Transportation Management Association up in North called Jive, I don't know if you've heard of them. They helped contribute money, and we got a new crossing. So now a kid and her mom can cross the street and use that trail network for the outcomes that we want, right? We want good behavior, we want something that's predictable, and we provided the infrastructure for them. Or infrastructure for those darn scooters that everybody says, ah, not everybody, a lot of people say, they're blocking my sidewalk. I have nowhere to park them. Well, let's create space for them, right? So the issue wasn't the scooter. The issue was that we haven't created a physical environment for them somewhere them to be. So we have about 45 of these painted drop zones now in the core of the city, in recognition that the kids love them, everyone's using them in Midtown and in downtown, and let's create a parking space for them. And so this one, we were talking earlier, we have logistical challenges in the city of limited budgets and limited resources. The city of Sacramento is happy to remove on-street parking most of the time to create bike parking. Our challenge is that we need to keep those gutters clear, because when it rains, water needs to flow down them to get to the drainage inlet. When you put bike racks in there, the way that we normally handle it is a big machine or medium-sized street sweeper comes by and cleans it. I think it's every 3 to 4 weeks. But when you put bike racks in it, the street sweeper can't get to it. And so it's been a challenge. We have sponsors, the folks that will come in and sweep it for us, because I don't have the money to have them swept. But what's great about these, there's no infrastructure really. Those are flex posts. Sweeper can go right over them. And so they can be cleared and cleaned by our street sweeper as long as there are no scooters. We're working on a system. And I know the city of Davis was also piloting something like that. But really creating a system for good outcomes, or where a mom and a kid can cross the street and feel comfortable, right? That traffic calming aspect. So the families can feel comfortable biking and getting out, whether it's for sport, this was for sport, but it could be for transportation. The church near my house has a walk-in roll to worship, I think is what they call it. So they encourage biking into their services on Sundays. And it's great because you see the adult bicycles, the kid bicycles, and it's not a quiet street. Kids are on the sidewalk, but that's okay. It's not a very crowded sidewalk. But making sure that we make things comfortable for people of all ages and abilities. So that is my presentation. Thank you. I want questions. I want to talk to you and hear what you think.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Really fascinating stuff. I've got a lot of questions, but I'll start with the big one. What is your department and your role in regional planning? How do you work with, or sometimes, as you mentioned, with West Sacramento, against other, cities, counties, regions? For example, people from the Bay Area commuting up to Tahoe and making a bunch of traffic.
Yeah. Well, I would say compete against West Sac. I am a competitive person by nature. I just have in fun ways. I'm not deep and tedious like West Sacramento, but like, oh guys, I'm gonna get you. That sort of thing. So we all compete against each other because they're limited resources and we have to. But I also want their success. I want Davis to see West Sac, Roseville, Citruside, all of them to succeed. So how do we collaborate on the regional level? Well, that's SACOG, the Sacramento Area Council of Governments. Their role and responsibility to collaborate regionally. And they do a great job of that. And part of what I task my team with is also getting to know our partners in other cities, whether it's the county or the city or even Caltrans, because Caltrans manages the freeways for all the folks that are going up the top, right? And to build those relationships so we can understand their needs and they can understand our needs, because there will be jurisdictional boundaries where we have overlap, and how can we work together on that? And that could be Caltrans, because in Sacramento, around the grid, the freeways are elevated. Those streets underneath those elevated freeways, well, the streets are ours. To change them requires Caltrans approval, right? So we need to have a good relationship with them. Not just me, but it's also a good thing to do. So there's a lot of collaboration, working with each other. But ultimately, it's SACOG's responsibility to think about regionally how we work, where housing is supposed to go, or the densities of housing, how we connect transit-wise. SACOG is wrapping up, I think they're wrapping up, a regional transit needs study. And they work with all of our partners to figure out, okay, what are your needs at a granular level and also at a macro level.
Thank you.
Oh, thanks. So I was just wondering, like, does the city of Sacramento have a transit-oriented development vision? Because like you said, that you guys are responsible for transportation planning, but then land use falls in another department.
It does, yeah.
So how does that work?
Yeah, so we work together collaboratively. In fact, I meet with my colleague, my counterpart in our housing and land use group. His name is Matt Hurdle. I meet with him on a monthly basis and we talk about the work that we're doing and how we can collaborate. And when they're doing their land use designations and their zonings, my team is part of their effort, just as their teams are part of my effort when I do my transportation planning. So we collaborate a lot. I will say the city of Sacramento is probably one of the more progressive cities in California when it talks about our land uses and the densities of our land uses. So that we are looking to increase our as a city, increase our densities throughout the entire system, meaning even in our single family areas, allowing for higher density there. And then working with transit-oriented development, that's also working with our partners in regional transit, because they own a lot of real estate. So Sac State, for example, there's a 65th Street Station light rail station. It used to be a big parking lot. Now it's a whole bunch of housing, right? And so we're working to support that. And through that, we were able to make some improvements in the walking and biking environment to better connect the folks that are moving into that housing to the campus through Hornet Tunnel.
I wanted to ask, as the state of California has shifted a lot of their workforce to being more hybrid, and that was a huge part of how the grid was designed to shuttle people to and from their parking facilities. What is kind of your vision that the transportation system can move into, given the whole shift in the workforce and its demand in downtown Sacramento?
Good question. So the city of Sacramento's largest employer is the state. And so with the transition to hybrid, in fact, many departments and agencies are still mostly at home for the state. That means that our downtown does not have the same level of peaking congestion as it used to have during pre-COVID days. But we still have almost the same amount of vehicles coming through. The patterns have just changed because we're not just an employment hub, we're an entertainment hub as well. So they're going to Golden One, who has millions of visitors per year, and there are a lot of folks still driving to Golden One. Or they're going to Midtown. I would say that downtown is the regional hub for the Sacramento region. And because our transit system is not there yet, it's a lot of driving. So while I don't think anything's going to change in the near term, and we really recently adopted a plan for downtown, a transportation plan for downtown, so we're not really looking to do that. But if money were no option, let's talk big, and I were the ruler of the world, what I would do is I convert a lot of our one-way streets to make them more people-focused, easier to cross the street, easier to access businesses. A lot of folks get confused when they're driving downtown and they don't understand the one-way system. If I were, all empowered and had all the money, I would. We face a lot of challenges with converting our streets to two-way though. We're currently converting 5th Street from one-way to two-way, which I'm really excited about. And it'll facilitate access to Golden One and to the train station. Love that. Our plan includes a two-way conversion of I Street. I'm pretty sure it's from 13th East to 21st. We were ready to do it. There's a heavy rail line. in the middle of that. Heavy rail, changes to heavy rail require approval from the California Public Utilities Commission, as well as the owner of the rail, which is the Union Pacific Railroad. And they asked that we do a traffic analysis, and we did. And they created some other congestion of parallel streets to which they had concern. They were concerned about backup over the tracks and other areas. And so basically we got told, no, you can't. And we tried to argue that it was a 3-lane roadway in one direction being converted to 2-way with a single lane in that direction. In fact, we were removing a lane. And they said, no, you're actually adding a lane because you're adding a new direction of travel. And so and also they don't like at-grade crossings. Usually they require every new at-grade, you have to close an at-grade. So it became problematic. And our money is funded through a grant with a very strict timeline. So ultimately what we wound up doing, which is going under construction this summer, is instead of converting it to 2-way, we're just gonna make it 2 travel lanes and put in a separated bike lane. I don't know if we'll ever get to a place where we'll be able to implement that 2-way conversion, but I'm a big fan of the 2-way conversions. They're complicated and they cost a lot of money, but they really help focus our streets on, rather than moving people in and out regionally, really focusing on the sense of place.
So thank you so much. I really like the process and how you explained from the idea to the actual implementation, because I think people don't really know that a project takes like 10 years to be done or more. And so like you told us that the values were part of like what you got from the community. And part of that 10-year and some of what we were talking, it's like people can change like, during those 10 years. So I have 2 related questions. One, how did you engage the community at that time? Can you tell us more about that? And then are you planning on having them engaged again to review these values? And what would that do to the priority?
Yeah. So how do we engage the community in development of these values, criteria, and metrics? A lot of engagement with our communities. And so I'm a big believer in a telephone call rather than an email. Going to somebody in person rather than on Zoom if we can. And of course, this was COVID, so we started this process before there were vaccines, and we ended the process after everybody probably had at least 2 doses of the vaccine. So it morphed over time. But what we wanted to do is, because it's kind of a complex process that folks aren't like, ask your values about transportation investments, kind of weird, right? It's not asking for your priority project, it's asking for your values. That was a difficult conversation that we had to have a number of times. It took a lot of resources, a lot of conversations, and focusing folks on really their core values. So it was conversation after conversation after conversation at Celebrate Oak Park, at the dance day, at the fashion show, at the trades day. And we did an online survey and we did a paper survey. And we tallied all that and we asked people for, when we did the surveys, their race and ethnicity, then the zip code where they live. I didn't want anybody to like be worried about who they were, so just their zip code for where they lived. And just a couple of demographic pieces of information we asked from them, just to see who was responding and from what part of the city they were responding from. So we did a lot of that for round 1 to determine what these values were. And then the point system, we took it to city council and they liked it, they thought it was great and they adopted it. And then when we applied it to the project. We didn't want to have folks get too caught up in like, my favorite project is not a priority. I'll talk values first. And then we applied it to the projects. And the question we asked them was not, do you agree with these priorities? But we asked them, does anything seem wrong? Based on these 5 values, the metrics we talked about, is anything off? And what we were looking for, did we forget a project? Did we misscore a project? Maybe it has a big bus component and we didn't give a point for that and it should be a high priority. What we did discover was that we didn't set up off-street paths to do well in this prioritization process. And when we talk about our high injury network, Vision Zero, which was a full 12 points or a 5th of our scoring, the city's high injury network is only on street. It doesn't include anything off street. And so we tried to tweak with it, but I'm still not 100% satisfied with the outcome of that because none of our shared use paths are really scoring well on this. But we've also got like 15 miles of construction now, so I'm feeling good for at least for the time being, for the TPP, we're pretty good. But it didn't work out so great. And so those are the questions we were asking, but then the problem hit is that not everybody understood what we were asking. So one neighborhood in North Sacramento, who I think are the best, and we're trying to build a relationship and they don't trust us, we're white people from government and they've been harmed by government a lot over decades. They misunderstood the question, or maybe we didn't communicate it clearly. And so they're like, we need to do neighborhood voting for our top projects. They organized themselves in an incredible way, went knocking on doors, asked folks for their priorities, came to me and said, here are my priorities. And that wasn't the question. And they were hurt, very hurt. And when I went to city council for approval, they all called in against this process. And that made me really sad. And that means that I didn't do something right, because as the person responsible for moving this through this caking system. And so what I committed to them at that council meeting was that I'm gonna come and have many conversations with you. And I've been to many of their community association meetings since November. Didn't miss December because I was on vacation, but going to them to talk through the process and the outcomes and see how I can help them be successful in what their wants are related outside of this process. And sometimes it's as simple as like, they have a lot of potholes, and how do they get potholes filled? 311, I told them that, I was with them on a Wednesday, they did it, I got a call from them on Saturday, the pothole got filled, and that was a win for them. Because they're so disconnected from government, they don't even know the basic systems of how you get a pothole filled. So while their priority project is the Arcade Creek Trail, which I love, and I wish it was a higher priority, it's not a high priority in the TPP. I can still provide support to them and continue to build that relationship while acknowledging that perhaps I caused harm by not properly communicating what we were asking for. So there were some rough patches for sure. It wasn't all sunshine and flowers, but I still think that we came with a good outcome. Our goal is to revisit it every 5 years for the general plan update. So I'll be back again, or my team will. In about 4 years, we'll start the engagement process again. You, yes.
So you mentioned the Vision Zero in the previous slides under the scoring system, right? There's 12 points for the Vision Zero plan. I'm just curious, is your team actually on the task force under that policy, or you work with other teams? Because I know if the city becomes a Vision Zero program, then they form a task force and probably work with planners, police department, or all sorts of public agency in the city. Like, can you share some of your experience over there?
Yeah, so when I was hired at the city, I was hired as a bike lady. And then a month in, the traffic engineer is like, hey, I got this thing for you. It's called doing a Vision Zero action plan. Sure, okay, I'll do it. And so I developed, see, before I had a team, developed the Vision Zero action plan. We had a consultant on board, we did data analysis, and we had a task force. Our task force included our police department, our fire department, our planning department, which is housing and land use. It included public health. It included our under-resourced communities, our metropolitan planning organization, mobility advocates. It included a lot of folks. And that task force met throughout the development of the action plan. We haven't continued to engage our task force since the development and approval of the action plan. It's something maybe we probably should consider doing again. It's just a matter of staff resources. And are we able to do that? I'd actually like to update our Vision Zero action plan. So we got it approved in 2018, and I think it's worth revisiting. We don't know where we're gonna get the money for to do that, because remember my idea to implementation, we have to get a grant that comes out every 2 years. And so I'm not really sure where we're gonna get that money from.
Safe Street for All, that program adequate funding for Vision Zero.
Okay, great. Safe Streets for All. Who knows about the Safe Streets for All program from the Fed, supported by Biden money? Woohoo, I love that program. We're following all the Biden money possibly we can. For the first round for Safe Streets and Roads for All, otherwise known as Safe Streets for All, we applied for Marysville Boulevard. It's one of our 5 corridors, the highest number of severe injuries and fatalities in North Sacramento and under-resourced community. We did the action plan, Vision Zero action plan. We identified the 5 corridors with the highest number of fatalities. We took them all together because we're just crazy and caffeinated. We did planning efforts for all 5 at the same time, all those 5 corridors. One of those was Marysville. And then we finished it. And a year later, or maybe 2 years later, the Biden infrastructure package passed, and they developed the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant program. We applied, and we didn't get it. And I'm really bummed we didn't get it because it's such a compelling story for Marysville. I'm going to take a moment to acknowledge the harms that were caused to the El Paso Heights community. It used to be a 2-lane roadway that was really focused on the community. It was in the county, I believe, or maybe the city of North Sacramento. Sometime in the mid-century, it was incorporated into the city of Sacramento. We took it from a 2-lane road to a 5-lane road, destroyed the neighborhood essentially. All the neighborhoods are commercial, died out, now it's very auto-focused. There are a lot of places of worship along the corridor, a few crossings. It's a challenging street. And so we were passionate about getting funding for it. And we applied and we did it. And we did a debrief with the federal government to find out why didn't we. It's a really compelling story. And unfortunately, for all the Safe Streets for All program, there's a cap of 15% of the pot of money per state. That means California can get the same amount as South Dakota. We have Los Angeles, we have San Francisco, we have San Jose, we have Oakland. And basically what they told us was that we were in the highly recommended for funding category, but there was a limit on how much money they can give California, and we just didn't get it. And so you can go after planning or implementation, and we wanted implementation because we want to improve those streets. So that grant is out again. My team was working on the application. We do Marysville again. We're going to take the input that we heard, but there were some areas like you do better in economic development. So we're working on that, and we're going to reapply. But that means that we can't do another planning grant because we're doing implementation. We only do one or the other. And in fact, Sacramento has not done great with the Biden infrastructure money. Everyone's like billions and billions of dollars. We can do all this stuff. So we applied for 3 programs, and we keep on losing to our coastal partners. And again, Hunger Games, I want them to do well. I really, really do. I'm also tired of them winning all the time, just like the Warriors when I was really cranky about that. This is after another grant loss, and I'm like, oh, the Bay Area won again. It's that we just aren't getting that money, and we're trying, and we're just not making it happen. And I'm a competitive person, going to do better, see what we can do to make it happen. But it's been a struggle for us to get that money. You're next.
To continue on the Vision Zero conversation, I'm just kind of curious, like, how is Sacramento doing, like, in terms of deaths in the last 5 years?
Hold on, maybe I have that slide in the back. Hold on, I have backup slides to see if I have it.
Sounds like you've been kind of pushing hard on projects, but, you know, how are we doing in outcomes?
Okay, so this is part of another, I have this backup just in case I need this. So for walking, our mode share, as measured by census data, is 2.9%. You know, there's more walking than that, but it's a metric that we all have agreed to use because we don't have a better way to measure walking. With our Vision Zero action plan, we found that 32% of those were seriously injured or killed when people walking, well over represented. And so that data goes through to 2015. We're doing a new analysis as part of our Streets for People Active Transportation Plan. And that data is from 2016 through 2020, and that's dropped from 32% to 21%. So we're seeing improvement. Still not great, still not where we want to be at all, but we're seeing progress. Similarly, I'll get to similarly for biking, 1.6% mode share. Again, that doesn't represent everything, but that's the thing that we've all agreed on for now to measure biking. 60% of those seriously harmed or killed were people biking. And that's from 2009 to 2015. And the data from 16 to 20, we're down to 9.3%. So not perfect, not great, but we're making progress. We're still one of the worst in the state. And really, we need to curb our impaired driving. We need to curb our speeding, and we need to build better infrastructure. And it's just infrastructure, as I mentioned, just takes so long that it's just hard to make that big progress when our funding structure and our process structures are set up like that. That's your question? Well, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm right here, like, these deaths are the total traffic related deaths?
Okay, I have a bunch of hands all went up and I don't know where they all went, so you over there. Yeah, you.
I noticed in the city, the way a lot of the intersections are timed, that there's like 0 seconds of all red time on the traffic signals. And I was wondering if that came up at all in talking about improved safety, or if you think that's something that contributes to the pedestrians not being safe in the downtown core.
So our traffic signal folks and I disagree on this. So academic research would be great to talk about this. So I say, folks, please put it in all red. A couple of seconds to make sure the intersection is clear before folks get to go. Our traffic signal folks believe in longer yellow would do better. And so this is where academic research can help us figure out what is the right approach. Because I don't want to say just because I feel like it's the right idea that we should do it. I'd like to have it backed up with data. And so we don't do that. I'd like us to do that, but I also just want like us to do whatever is the right way to avoid those intersection crashes. So I posed the idea of all red, I just haven't gotten there. All right, so there's a hand over here. Yeah.
Thank you for your work. Thank you for coming. Maybe there's sensitivity because of recent events, on communication in diverse communities. And also my research is green hydrogen, so people don't even know what it is. And it happens to potentially be in disadvantaged communities all over them. And it appears to be like a new thing to reach out to learn what they want, what they need if they're in, if they're not even know. And it really caught my attention that with your expertise with neighbors in Sacramento, this miscommunication happened.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask your ideas of, how to reach out in a, efficient, if that's a good word.
Yeah.
How much more information, does it have to be a different strategy to reach out, or how to present it to people who need to fund it?
Yeah.
The only argument right now is like, hey, they can block it. So then they're like, oh, what again?
Yeah.
They can block your project. It's the only thing that has worked to bring some attention. So I think that's.
Yeah, reaching folks is difficult because just think about it. You have your day job or whatever you do. If you're a parent, you've got like kids, sports, lunches, all that sort of stuff. So unless it's your passion, it's really hard to engage folks. And so what I've tasked me and my team with doing is building those relationships. So it's not extracting from our communities on the one thing that I need from them, but it's a two-way relationship that I give to them, they give to me. And I give to them and like, this is how you fix a pothole, or let me connect you with South Sacramento, Meadowview, another under-resourced community of color who we've been endeavoring to build relationships with. And it's been smooth, bumpy, smooth. And they reached out to me a couple of months ago. They said there's this intersection of Amherst and Meadowview, and it's a problem because a lot of our community don't have cars. And on the north end, they live on the south, and on the north end is a shopping plaza, and they'd like to move a shopping plaza. But the pedestrian stuff and the signal timing wasn't working for them. I don't work in real life, like in real implementation of small fixes like that. That's our traffic engineers. So I connected them to our traffic engineers, said, hey, Megan, can you work on this? And great, we'll work on it. But then I got a call like, hey, we haven't heard back. And it's a matter of resources. We're just overwhelmed. We have so many folks we have to work with. So I pinged them and I said, hey, really, really important to reach back out to them. Keep this line of communication going to get this fixed. So it requires a lot of relationships and not extracting. Like when I went to Meadowview, I was talking about the TPP and I wanted their input. That's me extracting from them without them getting any direct benefit because we're not talking about implementing anything right now. We're talking about processes and policy. And so my giving back to them is making the connections for them to get the immediate things that they want. And so when we do our work, I think it's hard if you're doing specific things around hydrogen or whatever it might be, to work with folks that have those relationships already rather than for you trying to build those relationships. And the other thing is to acknowledge that they have a lot on their plate. And this might not be the thing that they care about. And if it's not, we have to acknowledge that and let it go because they have other things that they're, even like we think it's the best thing since sliced bread. That's a really old timey saying that I've said. But we have to acknowledge their wants and their values and respect that. It's a hand in the back somewhere.
I wanted to talk about the funding a little bit more. And so I noticed in the pie, you didn't have property taxes.
Correct.
And I wanted to know why there's no property taxes for transportation in the pie, and if there's any chance that because of the gas taxes might be, something that's gonna end-ish.
Yeah.
Like, is that something that's coming up in the discussion for funding, and like what other ways you think there could be funding for transportation?
Property taxes are a third rail issue. So welcome to California on Proposition 13, where property taxes are capped at the year at which you bought your home. So my wife bought our home in the year 2000. So my property taxes are capped on 2000, the value of my home in 2000. My home's value is much higher now because it's California, right? There's not enough housing, basic demand. And so touching property tax is a very difficult thing. What you can do is pass a tax on property, on the value of your property, right? To generate additional dollars. But again, that's something that you need to pass a vote for that. And I don't know how popular that will be. So as we move away from gas vehicles and the dollars generated from the gas tax dwindled, we need a better way to look at how we fund. It's already not enough money, and then how are we gonna fund that money coming into the future? There's been talk for years about a vehicle miles traveled tax. Again, I think it's a reasonable way to talk about that. There is an equity piece to it because not everybody can afford to live close to where they work. And so, like, for example, the city of Sacramento, I'm a white collar desk jockey. I work at a desk, I do my thing. I'm lucky that I live close to work, it's 3 miles. Our crews who are repaving our streets, putting up our signs, they can't afford to live in Sacramento. So they are farther out and they're driving in. So they're paying a heavier tax for doing vehicle miles traveled for their commute to the office. But there's a big equity consideration that we need to sort out if we're gonna move to vehicle miles traveled. There's also a bill right now for a pilot on the weight, the vehicle weight and taxing by weight. I don't know if that'll pass, we'll see. But I think that transportation is not sexy, it's not easy to fund. I think it's fantastic and really complex and a really great vehicle for us to achieve our goals. But it's not something that the community's rallying around. I think it's going to be really difficult moving forward in the future to figure out how we fund mobility and where our priorities are. Transit's hitting a fiscal cliff. Like there's not going to be enough money for transit. And that means that operations are going to be dwindling significantly. And how do we address that? And do we put our money where our values are? Our values really are around climate change and air quality and public health. How do we fund that? And what our current process to do, something our global royal hour, is that we're putting the responsibility on the private individual for you to buy an electric vehicle, which means that you're paying that cost individually when you buy the EV, rather than as a society we come together and say we're going to fund walking, biking, and transit, and maybe shared electric vehicles. But we haven't, it's not a big enough issue for folks to get excited and make that change that maybe other communities and other countries have.
Great presentation and great talk. So we are UC Davis. Actually, we're supposed to be UC Sacramento. That's our backyard. It's a tiny place. How do we do better on collaborating with the city on internship, case studies, writing grants together, working with your team better? I think we're doing way more work in Europe than what we're doing in Sacramento.
What? Oh, I didn't know that. Now competitive nature is like working with Europe. Oh,
And I do have a couple of grants with and I have kind of, is it a requirement to be Jennifer? Like I work with Jennifer Grass, Jennifer Vanneman.
Yes, the revolution of the Jennifers, as the city council says. So yes, so Jennifer Vanneman, Jennifer Grass, so she's got a card now. Yeah, but that's why folks call me JDW, because there are lots of Jennifers everywhere. I think it's a generational thing. Women my age. But yeah, how do we work together? I think the challenge is like, I don't have resources to do research or to contribute. Like, we are running to catch up on everything all of the time, responding to council member requests, constituent requests. We don't, like City of San Francisco, I'm a little jealous, they have a lot more staff than we have. When they do a project on the street, they're required to, and they do an evaluation of how well it worked. I love that. I would love to be able to do that. We just don't have the resources to do that, and it's not a priority of our city council. I don't want to say that. City council hasn't allocated the resources for staffing that we would need to be able to do that. And so I think I would absolutely love to be able to evaluate whether all red phase or longer yellow makes the most sense. Do people really understand what pedestrian hybrid beacons are? How do we do mode shifts? So we're updating our transportation demand management ordinance. Our ordinance is from 1985. Really not addressing the needs or realities of how people travel and how we change the way people travel. So we did an RFP, where brought Steer as the company that was selected, and we're bringing them on board to help us do our transportation demand management ordinance update so that we have the policies and the levers to get to better outcomes. But ultimately, I'd love to be able to do research. We just, if you find something that we can collaborate on, absolutely, if we can make the time for it.
There are other excited for the in-person questions.
Go ahead, Ben.
Oh yeah,
Let's
we
see
have
what
several
we've got.
questions here. Yeah. So we have some questions here from Lyndall Price. So first question Lyndall asks is, do you evaluate pavement and crosswalks for pedestrian safety? At a meeting, I heard people who use wheelchairs say that they would not use curb ramps at a pedestrian crossing because their wheelchairs would get stuck in the crosswalk due to poor pavement?
Oh, great question. So we do a pavement evaluation every 2 years. It's called our Pavement Conditions Index. And it gives an evaluation of the quality. It's anywhere from 0 to 100. Our average PCI is 59, which is just not great. Roseville, Folsom, they're closer to 80. We do an evaluation, but if there's ever an issue for accessibility, we will address that right away. So Lindell, let me be Lindell who I know. Lindell, if that's you, reporting to 311 if there's a specific issue, because we will be able to address spot issues like that through our 311 system to make that happen.
All right, another question from Lindell. Does the city of Sacramento consistently provide multimodal directions to its facilities and events? Listing transit, walking, and bicycling first with driving and parking last.
That is my hot thing right now, folks. So I got, the mayor's office was doing this environmental roundtable thing, and they sent out an email, and it was like, driving directions to the parking garage is here. And I was like, wow, bike parking is available out front. You can walk taking this way, and light rail is here. And also our friends at Saba did the same thing. And so through our transportation demand management ordinance update, that's one of the things that we flagged to say, okay, at minimum for city events, we need to provide first walking, biking, and transit directions. If you want, you can provide parking directions as well. And potentially even can we do that for events that are hosted in the city of a certain size? And where do our policy levers land with that? Is it over a certain threshold that we experience, and do they need a permit from us? We're over 5,000 attendees. So we're gonna be looking at that. I'm excited for that because that's been my topic for the last couple of months, because we tell people to drive and this is how you do it, they will do it by driving.
We're not even good at that at UC Davis. Yeah.
Well, it's all a work in progress.
I keep getting myself in trouble. I'll fight the good fight.
Yeah.
All right, and we have another question here from Lindell, which just asks, does the city of Sacramento correlate the timing of its schedules with transit service to its events?
I'm not sure schedules of.
Correlate the timing of its schedules with transit service to its events.
Well, we don't operate transit, so I'm not really sure how regional transit does their thing. I do know they're aware and try to coordinate with events at Golden One, but outside my area of expertise.
Maybe city events, you guys sometimes pick up the transit schedule.
We try to host city events in transit-friendly areas. And as my team has been directed, now they also offer transit directions to their events.
Well, I think this has been great.
Oh, there's more questions.
From others or from the same person?
One from Lindell and one from another person.
Okay, why don't you do the other person and then we'll
Okay,
call it.
okay. Urvi asks, you mentioned the issue of developers not wanting things that would change the footprint of their work. Are there tools that would let a developer see the proposed or ideal plan, not just the current roadway, so that they could proactively plan for a more sustainable future?
Oh, good question. So interestingly, so that when I talked about that, that was at a policy level of some future condition of like, these are our standards. When a developer comes in, they are required to meet the street cross-section for not what exists today, but will be happening. So for example, if we have a developer coming in an area where we have a planned cycle track, and it's not there now, but there's also not real estate for it, they're required to set their development back so that we can accommodate that in the future when we make that happen. Or Stockton Boulevard, one of our Stockton Boulevard corridor plan includes shared use paths on either side. Also on street facilities, but also shared use paths. And when a developer will come in, at minimum, we're gonna ask that they provide us that real estate. We also can require them to build it. Sometimes we don't require them to build it because then you've got like the stub of like, you know, one parcel of a path, and that's not really helpful. And over time, it might degrade. But we do try to leverage that and make that work as much as possible.
And I think we're gonna end there because it's already 3 o'clock, but let's thank Jennifer.